Okay, so we got a very crude map going on here. This is not a ramp that we would typically use. By the way, ramp is another word for the color scale that applies to chloropleth maps. It uniquely applies to chloropleth maps. Um, so where would we look for colors? Well, realistically, we would go to some place like Color Brewer, um, and we would use that as a place to pull our colors from. Of course, in choosing our divisions, we would want to be mindful of any number of things, right? I mean, one of the things to consider is what constitutes, um, you know, what constitutes bad unemployment. As it happens, there is such a thing as overemployment, right? So we don't necessarily want unemployment to be below a certain percentage. In fact, under 5% is sometimes considered not so great. So we'd want to choose that accordingly. I want to let's just go through some of the other changes that we can make here. So you see that I have a chance to just sort of sub-select this. I could obviously edit this to any hex value I like. And I generally prefer an opacity on these of about 80%. I find it's a bit easier to read. Likewise, um, you can choose the outline color as well. So there's really a great deal of customization that can be done here. Again, these are really not very good colors, but obviously you all will be able to sort that out yourselves. So we have something, so like border color, for example, this says use one color. I might do that. I might choose a lighter color, so it's slightly less obtrusive. Oops, that's actually not less obtrusive, is it? Because it's at high opacity, so maybe I put this at 50%. Right, so this is the kind of thing that you play with, right? You sort of futz around with it and see what you get. Now we also have this issue of the rollover box. The rollover box can also be customized, and I see they don't make you get it out of a drop down anymore. By default, what you are going to get in the rollover is you're going to get the first 10 columns of data available on that particular row. And so I have a couple of options here for how I can modify this. I probably don't need this description or the vertex count. I probably do want, I have their country name, so I probably don't need the rest of this stuff. Right, so I can do this just sort of automatically. I can see if I just sub-select these, I can reduce down what's here. Well, this doesn't seem to be rendering very nicely. However, I can get more, in order to address that, I can get more customized. So you'll hopefully recognize at this point that this is, of course, simply JavaScript, right? Or sorry, this is rather HTML. This is markup. So I can actually take this and I can modify it to include additional information. So for example, if I wanted to put a note in here, where I said note all data from Eurostat, right? That's a note that I might want to put in. Something about the source. I could obviously have additional columns that had more information in them. And we can see that this comes up very nicely in our additional in our info windows. Likewise, I don't have to let it just be the name of the column, which will be the default, right? I can say unemployment rate. I can also use this to add units, right? So we can see that there are these brackets, like as though this were a JavaScript object around the variable placement. But I can do something like this. I can add %. And we could even get more, you can think about ways that you can manipulate this. You could get, sort of even more elaborate. If I had images, for example, there's no reason that I couldn't have one of these columns contain links to images that I could then embed in that, rollover. I've seen people do things where they actually embed entire iframes or little charts, right? You really have quite a lot of flexibility with this. So that sort of covers the basics of doing the rollovers and the chloropleth map, but I want to point out a couple of other features here. So we will have to share this. We will have to make this at least, at least anyone with the link if we want to be able to publish this. And then in the publishing, we get a handful of options. So if we come under the map and we say publish, okay, we can see that it's telling us, okay, our default is we're going to make this 500 pixels wide and 300 pixels high. Obviously, we can change that. We can get this KML, we can get an iframe, right, that we can embed directly into an HTML page. But I want to point out that there's more than just the There's more than just the overall map. This is also, and I'm going to take this and put it into an Aptana document so I can see it more clearly. Right, so this is an entire HTML document they've given me. And it's not simply the map itself, but it's also the position and zoom level of the map. So again, when we want to think about how the stuff that we're creating can be reusable and extensible, we can imagine that depending on a particular story. So again, I'm just going to come here, create a new HTML page. And actually, I don't really need the template at this point because all of that information is available here. And I'm going to save this in my unemployment right, very simple, very used to this. So if I come here and I open that HTML file, I should get, indeed, now you can see that the way that I've saved this, right, reflects the zoom and center of the map that as it was in preview. That might be fine. This is obviously a weird view. But if I wanted to change that, I can do that either by simply navigating in this, right, and saying, oh, actually, I want to be, down here, and I want to be, really close to this thing. And then once again going to publish it, and it's going to change. The zoom and center level. Or of course, if I look at the code here, I could probably sort out where that's placed. So you can see it's actually showing us the JavaScript for generating this. We could actually do this, straight up with JavaScript. And you can see that there are ways that we could sort of manipulate the look and feel here. So I'm guessing maps, heat map, options, style. What do you know? We see something called map. We see zoom and center. So this is a lat long. I could change this lat long. The zoom level, I believe the higher the number, the further out your zoom. So if I were to just change this manually to 5 and reload my page, oops, I guess that got closer. Maybe? Let's see, let's take it to 2 and see what we get. There we go. See, so the nice thing about this is that actually once you generate one of these maps, you can start manipulating the JavaScript if you want to. But again, the point is that I could have multiple maps that show multiple views on this same underlying sort of data table, and thereby be able to use, sort of reuse this data set multiple times, in my projects. Sorry, a bit of a cutoff there, but I was running into a little bit of trouble. But I did want to show you guys an additional feature that you can have here, because one of the issues that we see with our Google Fusion Tables maps, or just any library that we use a lot, is this sort of idea of style fatigue, right? We've seen it all before. Too many Google Maps, right? And of course, that's not what we want our readers to think. We want to be able to customize this in a way that suits our publication the same way that we feel about the visualizations themselves, right? That's why we're putting all this effort into doing that documentation so that we can really manipulate these from a visual perspective to look and feel how we want them to feel, which is going to be different from place to place. So there's something called the Fusion Tables. One of the things that we can manipulate in addition to the sort of colors of our countries when we do a choropleth map is we can also manipulate the underlying map. Now, this appears to be not working very well. Typically, you've been able to sort of put in the URL to your map and it would kind of generate this for you. Right now, it seems to be having trouble sort of locating the tables. But I do just want to sort of point out that that we can do this edit on the underlying map. So I'm just going to demonstrate this with this slider here, where we can sort of go super, super saturated, or we can go really, really gray. A lot of people like the gray. There are more options. We can sort of get very selective about it. And rather than worrying about the sort of automatic generator here, we're going to look at the JavaScript as a way to pull this for our own map type. And so what I can see here is that I've got my map. Let's go ahead and pull up Aptana that shows our original one. So we have this idea. We have this initialize function, which it looks like we have a version of here. We have the map itself and its zoom. We now have this style object, right? Again, this is something that you guys are familiar with. So it looks like I can probably do something like I can throw a style object in here. And what else is missing in my, okay, so, whoops. So I can get this styled map type. You can see that they've always called it map. And let's see, and we're using styled map type in here. Doesn't look like it. So maybe what I can do is say something like, there's my map variable. Maybe throw this in here. Map type set, map type set. I don't know. Let's find out. By the way, this is kind of how it goes when we're trying to sort something out that we're not familiar with. Oh, what do you know? Worked right out of the box, right? This works because, of course, Google generated all this code, and so we can see that it's calling it's calling it map everywhere. But this doesn't conflict with our existing code, so this is where our styling comes in. Now we want to make sure, of course, that we are applying this map element, right? So I could actually define the styled map type probably up here. Actually, no, I don't want to. See, I want to look out for where my map is actually defined, where my map variable is defined, right? And then after that, I can add these additional variables. And if I wanted to get more specific about this, now that I have this, of course, I could go ahead and change this. I could make it a little bit more saturated, right? And there are ways to play with this in much more detail. Now, the one thing that I will point out is that if you are using this, styled map type, one of the things you will run into is that there is a set of usage limits for the Google Maps API, which is about 4,000 hits a day if you don't pay them. Fusion Tables maps, if you just use them straight up as they are embedded on a web page, do not at this point have usage limits. So it's something to keep in mind. Obviously, the customized maps look a little bit better, or they look a little bit less like Google Maps. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you don't get yourself into trouble with running over your usage limit if you have a lot of these going. So that's sort of the basic introduction to Google Fusion Tables maps. We'll do a quick look at this next week. Hopefully, this hasn't been, sort of too much new information. But again, I want to point out that like this is a template that you might create, and then all you might change is kind of some minor information in here. Things like the table ID and the column in order to get maps that look the way that you want them to look. One final point that I will make, which is actually a nice add that they created here, is that you can add features. Let's see, there used to be an option to add a legend, and I think it is in the change feature styles. Yes, so we can actually choose this automatic legend, and it's going to give us a legend overlaid on this. This is great because previously we used to have to actually create separate divs and do this ourselves. You're going to have some restrictions to the amount that you can customize this, but it's a very helpful thing to have. Of course, you also want to see how this looks on your final version. Oh, and that's interesting. And I think it probably does not apply unless you use the iframe source. So anyhow, hopefully a nice little intro to maps. This gives us better detail than some of the geo maps that were available. Obviously, it all depends on the detail level of your KML, and you can get very detailed KML if you want, as suits your needs. So that's all for now. I hope everybody has a good weekend, and we will see you next week.